In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw this really cute little kitten using our 4B pencil. If you don't have a 4B pencil, any pencil will do. If you choose a pencil with a B in it, it's going to make your picture darker and much easier to get those really dark tones. Let's get started. The first step that we're going to do is, because this little kitten has got its head to the side, we are just going to draw some lines to make sure that we get the ears and the eyes and the nose in line. Sometimes it's tricky, even when you're drawing it straight, to get those things lined up. And to just get them lined up makes a big difference to the end of your picture. So just put your ruler at an angle. It doesn't matter if your angle is slightly different to mine. It just means that your cat's head is going to be turned a little bit more, a little bit less. And we're going to lightly draw a line across the top of our ruler and across the bottom. So that's going to create two perfectly parallel lines. And then we're going to do another line underneath that. I'm pressing a little harder so that you can see what I'm doing, but you should press quite lightly for this because we don't want these lines to be visible at the end. What we're going to do is put the tips of the cat's ears in this top line. The eyes are going to go just underneath this line and the mouth will run along this line. So it helps us just keep everything looking right. I'm turning my page at an angle so that I can draw the head straight. It's a little bit easier for me. And we're going to start with the oval of the face. The face is going to come a little bit below our bottom line because this is where the mouth is. It's not necessarily the bottom of the cat's head. And we are going to go just below this line because that's where the tip of the ears are going to go. So we can't make our head go that high. Okay, just keep this line really light until you're happy with the shape of it. And as we start our shading, you might find you need to change the angle of it a little bit. We're just getting the basics of our picture now. So from this eye line, we're going to start our ear, and it's going to come up in a curved line to our top line. Okay, and we can do that on the other side. Do you see how just starting your picture with a couple of lines can really help you in the end? Right, and then we're going to come down with a curved line. Okay, try and make sure that these ears are round about the same size. So don't make one really skinny and one really wide. Try and get them about the same width. If you wanted to, you could use your ruler or you can just use your eyes to judge. Okay, next we're going to start with the cat's eyes, and we are going to actually use the ears to help us with this. So where we've finished our ears on the inside, just come down with a line. And that is going to be the center of our eyes later on. Okay, now this line that we've drawn here is actually to mark off the top of the eye. So don't draw the eye on the line. We're going to draw the eye below the line. And I'm just going to start with a nice dark circle underneath each of these marks that we've made. You might want to take your eraser and just lighten a section of it. And then around these circles that we've drawn, we're going to start at the top and draw our eye around that. Now, I found it easier to start with the pupil and then draw the iris around it rather than trying to draw an iris and then get the pupil inside it. I find it's easier to get that perfect circle if you've got a smaller circle to draw around. As we did with the ears, just take a bit of time to make sure that your two eyes are the same size. You could, if you wanted to, even draw another ruler line underneath it to make sure that they're the same height. Taking the time now to make sure that things match will help you later on in your picture. You don't want to draw a ton of things and realize, oh, the eyes are not the same size, and then you have to change everything else that you did after that too. Right, on the inside of the eye, we're going to come down a little bit. So from about halfway down the eye, we're going to start drawing a dark line going down. And try and do this at the same height on both of the eyes. So symmetry is quite important here. And this line can curve around the top of the eye and come just a little bit higher on the other side. Okay, so you can see I've done it on the one. I'm going to do it on the other one. I'm going a little bit darker. Because I'm using a 4B here, I'm getting a really nice dark line without trying very hard. So if I was using an HB, I'd probably be tearing through the page to try and get it this dark. Okay, then we're going to just go around the bottom of the eye. What we're going to do now is just color in circles, and we've pressed quite dark around this outline, and as we get to the pupil, I just want you to press lighter and lighter and lighter. If it's looking a little dark, you can just go with your eraser and lighten it up. And what I've done, similar to the pupil, on the top right-hand side, I've just taken my eraser and pushed over it, and it's lifted some of the pencil. And an eraser is a drawing tool as well. It's not just for rubbing out mistakes, you can use it to lighten shading. Okay, I'm just making these lines on the edges a little smoother. Notice I'm not using a regular eraser. This is called a kneadable eraser, and they're really nice if you want to rub out a thin little line or something really small, because you can shape it to be almost as thin as you like, which is really great if you're doing cat's whiskers or trying to lighten just a small corner of the eye. So it's a nice little tool to have if you're getting into pencil sketching. What we're going to do now is move on to the nose. Now the nose is going to be halfway between our eye line and our mouth line, and it's going to obviously be in between the two eyes. So kind of work out where halfway is. Everybody's ruler is a slightly different thickness, so I'm not going to give you measurements for this. Okay, and the nose starts as a curved line, and what I'm doing is using these two dark lines that I've drawn for the eyes as a guide. Your nose shouldn't be wider than these two lines. It should actually fit into it, because these lines are going to come down even lower to the nose. So let's bring them down, and it will help us get the top of the nose shape. So we're just doing a slightly curved line, and then we are coming in to finish it off almost like a triangle shape, but the top line of the triangle is curved. And I'm just going to do a bit of dark shading here. Because we're doing the nose quite small, we don't need to add in those details. Okay, and then we're going to draw a line down to our mouth line. Now from our mouth line, we're going to curve up on each side, so it's going to look like a really flattened W. So if you want to take your pencil, put it over the pupil, and just bring it straight down, you can make a little mark for yourself so you know where you got to get to. Okay, so from the center line here, we're just doing a curved line out and a curved line out this way. And they should be around about the same size. Again, just take some time to check that they are the same. Right, and what I'm going to do now is just erase some of my lines, especially because I've drawn them really dark. So these ruler lines that we've drawn, we don't need them anymore. We've drawn our ears, we've drawn our eyes, we've drawn our mouth. So I'm going to erase them so that I don't have to erase them after I've done shading. If you have rubbed out any of your lines that you've already drawn, just go over them again quickly. Okay, before we finish shading the face, we're just going to move on to the body. So I've put my page up the right way now, and I'm just going to draw the body in. Now it's quite a simple shape, and it should be about as wide as the head. So I'm almost drawing an oval shape. I'm not going to join the bottom of my oval because the cat's feet will be there. Okay, and at the bottom, we're just going to let it come out a little bit because the kitten's paws are sticking out a little bit. It's not the end of the world if you don't get the feet exactly at the same height, because it can look like the one foot is a little bit forward or the one's back. So you won't ruin your picture by making the paws slightly different heights, but obviously get them as close as possible. Okay, and then we're going to let those front legs come up. About halfway up our cat's body, and then that's going to be the chest of the cat. What we will do later is just do a bit of dark shading there, and it will all kind of fade into the background. So as long as you've got those 2 feet shapes. Now because we've come out to make this little foot, in the area where we started coming out, we're just going to draw a little line there. So that's going to show the fold of the foot. So as you started coming out, in line with that, we're just drawing a little curved line. Here is where I started going out with my foot, so I'm going to draw my curved line there. So that just shows that the foot is bent. And then we've got each of the little toes of the kitten. So I'm just drawing curved lines up. So on the left-hand side, they are going to arc out to the left, and on the right-hand side, it's going to be an arc out to the right. The first one will be quite close to the edge because that little toe is furthest away. We only see a little bit of it. And then the inside toe is going to look the biggest because we're seeing the side and the front view of it. Okay, and we're just going to leave it at that for now. We'll add the shading into it later. Right, let's go back to shading in. Now, I didn't want to start with shading in the face because that's quite tricky. So we're going to start with the body. It's nice and easy and we can get into it. and will make shading the head easier later. The shading technique that we're going to be using on this kitten is called scrumbling or scribbling, and it is what it sounds like. It's just scribbling in lots of little different directions. And at the end of it's going to create a texture that looks all fluffy and fuzzy, so it's nice for a cat. When you are choosing your shading technique, always think about the texture of the subject that you are drawing, and that can guide you in what kind of shading technique you could use. Right, so just along the bottom of the face here, I'm doing a little bit of my scribbling, and I'm doing it quite dark because the head is going to cast a shadow on the body. And I've made the shading on the left-hand side a little bit darker or wider, and that's because I'm going to make my light come from this right-hand side here. So the head's going to cast a little bit more of a shadow. Now, when we are shading this cat, it's going to be one of those tortoiseshell cats, so it's got a lot of markings on it. So when we're doing shading, we need to think about markings and about the shadow. Underneath this shading, we're going to come out with another dark line, and it's going to be kind of a triangular shape. So it's starting wider at the edge of the kitten's arm, and as you move into the chest, it's almost disappears to nothing. You can see I've done that in line with the front paw. And then we're going to do another little line of shading, and that's going to go almost all the way across the chest. So different people have different techniques or ways of doing things. I like to start with my darker shading and work to my lighter shading, but some people like to start with light and work to dark. As you do more pencil sketching, you just find the style that suits you best. Okay, I'm going to come and darken up the other side. Now, whenever you are shading something in, if you make the edges darker, it just looks a little bit more three-dimensional. So try and think about making the center of it lighter and the outside's darker. It gives it this rounded effect, which makes it more three-dimensional. Okay, so I've added a little bit of dark shading on this side of the kitten. What I'm doing now is just getting lighter and lighter. Okay, and in between these markings that I did earlier, I'm just doing some lighter scribbling. Keep coming out with darker lines. Here, I'm going to do a darker line, but I'm not making it as dark as the other lines that I've made. So I'm doing different tones because these tortoiseshell patterned cats will have slightly darker and lighter lines on them. Okay, I'm taking this line all the way across. And now I want a little bit of dark shading, almost coming down in a triangular shape. So I'm going to use this little line that I drew for the top of the paw because we want that to be darker. So if you want something to look like it's set back or hiding, you make it darker, and if you want to pull it forward, you make it lighter. So we're just going to do a triangle of shading across the bottom of this paw here. On the inside leg, we'll also do some dark shading, and then I'm doing just a little bit of lighter shading. Okay, along the chest, it's also going to be a little darker here. You can lighten it up, so just remember this area here is going to be the lightest part. If you find that you have made a little bit too dark, just use your eraser and lighten it up. What we're going to do now is just shade in each of these toes a little bit. So I'm just drawing a lighter line around the edges of it, and then a little line down that would be the claws of the kitten, and some light shading above it. Right, we're going to move on to the other side now. So let's start by darkening each edge of the leg, of the outside edges. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of darker shading in this area. It's almost like I've popped out with a triangle of dark shading here. And then I'm going to do another triangle shape of dark shading, almost like that on the other side. I'm not doing it as dark as the lines, so it's more of just a shadow or a different tone. Okay, and then again over this fold line, we're going to do a little bit of shading, some lighter tones in between it, so it's not just white. Again, go over the outside edge of each of these little toes, a nice line, that could be the claw, and a little bit of shading in between there. Okay, now the cat's body is going to make a lot of shadow on this floor that's here. So I'm just starting, again, you could do a little bit more hatching than scrumbling or scribbling. And we're going to start quite dark, and when you get about halfway down the legs, you can make it lighter till you get to the bottom of the legs, and then We're just going to add a little bit of shadow here. The legs will make a bit of shadow on the floor. Now what we're going to do, just to try and bring this together a little bit, is use our finger to rub over the shading. It's going to soften the shading so it looks a bit more like a fluffy kitten, but it also helps the legs to fade into the background, because actually the focal point of this picture is going to be the cat's head. So the cat's head's going to be really sharp and in focus, and the legs are going to look a little bit lighter and faded into the background. Okay, now that we've rubbed it, especially if you're using a B pencil, it's going to have pulled a lot of pencil in, and we just need to lighten up this middle bit here. So I'm taking my eraser, lightening up the chest and parts of the legs. Okay, and then you might also find that some of your darker tones have disappeared, and you want to go over certain patches and areas and just darken them up again. The trick to pencil sketching is that you don't just colour something in once. You've got to go back on and work on it again and again, and lighten it and maybe darken it and lighten it and darken it several times before you see the tones that you would like. And by doing layering like this, you do make your picture have more depth and richness. So don't worry if it doesn't look exactly how you want it to look after your first attempt. You need to keep working a picture. Right, so what you might want to do now is just pause the video and take a moment to check that you are happy with the way that you have shaded your legs. Right, so we're going to shade a nice dark V shape in the ears, and I've come in about 1/2 centimeter, and we're going to use the top of the head to help us get this shape. So we're going to come in a little bit, so don't worry about this circle here. So about 1/2 centimeter in, and then we finish our V or L shape there. And in this, we're just going to start with a bit of dark shading. Again, we're doing the hatching to show the fluffiness of the animal. And then we're going to just get lighter and lighter as we shade out of this V shape. Okay, and you need to stop before you get to the outside edge of the ear. Right, and then on the inside of the ear, we're just going to do a little bit of dark shading to the tip of the ear, from the base to the tip. And again, let that get lighter as we get closer to the middle. Then at the bottom of the ear, where it joins the head, we're also going to do a little bit of darker shading there. Right, let's do the other ear now. So again, with this V shape, that's a little darker. And then just by pressing lighter and lighter, we can get a lighter tone. And you can see this V or L shape is going to come quite low. Then the shading should fade into almost nothing before you reach the end of the ear. Okay, then on the inside, the top inside of the ear, we're just going to darken this little spot here, give the ear a little bit more definition. And at the base of the ear, on the outside, darken that up too. Right, now on top of his head, he's got a dark pattern that's coming down. So I'm just going to start from the middle of his head, really small cross hatching. And I'm going to let it come down in a V to just about in line with the eyes. It doesn't matter if you don't get this line perfectly straight or perfectly centered, because the cat's markings are not symmetrical. So if it's slightly off, that's fine. It can still look correct. Then halfway between this middle line and the ear, we're going to draw another line of darker shading coming down. So nice small cross hatches. And I'm coming out a little bit of an angle and letting that stop above the pupil. And it's also stopping a little higher, about 1/2 centimeter higher. Okay, and then we're going to do another one on the other side. This one hasn't worked out directly above my pupil, but as I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you don't get it exact, because the cat's markings are not going to be exact. Right, now what we're going to do is do a little arch of shading to join these three together. So it's almost like an arch there and an arch there. Okay, and then just colour in this shading. You can get little lines or scribbles coming off the edge of your picture. It will give it a bit more character. Okay, and then finally we're going to do a little arch to the ears. So almost the entire top of the head is darker shading. Now in this area here, underneath the ear, we're going to do a little bit of shading again, not as dark as this marking that we've done on its head. So a little lighter, and this is not going to be for marking off something, it's just to show some shading. Okay, and it's kind of like an upside down Y that goes over the eye. So it comes down where the ear joins the head, and then I've let it fork out into a Y shape. Okay, and we're going to do a little bit of that shading on the other side too, just because of the angle of the head. It might look a little bit different. Okay, I've taken the dark shading all the way to the ear, and we actually just want a little bit of light shading underneath the ear, so I'm just lightening up that little area there. Okay, now in the middle of the cat's face, on the bridge of its nose, we're also going to do some darker shading. And what I'm going to do is from the nose, I'm just going to bring a line up to the marking, and that's going to help us get our shading. What I'm doing now is not cross-hatching. It's more of a hatching, but I'm drawing curved lines, and they're going up to this marking. They're starting a bit darker on the nose and getting lighter as they go up. Okay, and I've darkened the edges of it a little bit too. You might want to rub this with your finger just to soften it a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to do a little bit more shading over the eye here, more scrumbling, more scribbling. And this is quite light shading. We're just using it to blend together the shading that we've already done. Okay, so we've done some quite dark shading up here and slightly darker shading there and on the nose. And we're just blending this shading all together now, putting a little bit of light shading over it to marry it together. Around the edge of the eye, you might want to do a few lines that mimic the shape of the eye. I'm going to darken my nose a little bit now that I've added more shading. And maybe you find you need to darken the outside edge of the eye. Now on this left hand cheek, we're going to come out with a little bit of darker shading. Not as dark as we did at the top, so kind of, let's call this the medium shading. Colouring around the edge of the eye, leaving a little bit of white around the eye. So don't do the shading right up to the eye, but it can follow the shape of the eye to the line that's come down. If you look at it, it's kind of like a triangle that's swooped in under the eye and come out the side of the face here. And we're going to do another one on the other side that's quite similar. So it's almost like it's going to swoop in under the eye, go out to the edge of the face. Okay, what we're going to do now is from this little drop at the outside edge of the eye, we're going to do shading going out. That's a little darker. You can carry it to the edge of the face. Right, now we're going to do some shading around the mouth. So we've got quite a dark line that shows the outside of the lips, and around that we're just going to do some lighter shading. Okay, and then at the bottom of the lips we'll do a bit of darker shading. What I'm doing now is just using my finger to soften that shading. Similarly to an eraser being a drawing tool, your finger can also be a drawing tool. Doing a little bit of dark shading around the bottom of the cat's jaw or face. Okay, I'm just going to lighten it up a bit again. Okay, directly under the nose, we're going to have this line be a little bit thicker and darker, and then it can get lighter again until it gets to the mouth. And then we need to add in the whiskers. So for the whiskers, we're just going to do 3 rows of dots going out. Okay, and then we're going to draw some whiskers. Now we're not going to make the whiskers go straight out, which is people's first instinct when they're drawing a cat. We're going to let them come down, and when you draw a whisker, you just need to do it with confidence. Put your pencil down and flick it out, okay? So don't be scared of these whiskers. What I'm going to do now is take my eraser, and if you have just a regular eraser, this can also work. Just make sure you use a sharp edge. And I'm going over these whiskers just to get some lighter tones. So what it will do is underneath it, it will pick up any pencil in its line, so it will look like some of the whiskers are a little bit lighter. What I'm going to do now is, again, just lighten some parts of the face. Over your colour and over the cheeks. We want to lighten the cheeks a little bit and its chin. The base of the ears should also be lighter. And then I'm going to come with darker tones again. So as I said earlier, pencil sketching is often about layers of colour. And the more layers of colour you do, the deeper and richer your picture will be at the end. Okay, so I'm just darkening my darker parts again. Around the mouth, edge of the face, there's markings on the cheeks. And when you're doing this, remember we have 3 types of shading. So we've got our dark shading, our medium shading, and our light shading. So don't just shade everything dark. Think about where it should be really dark, where it should be medium, and where it should be light. Right, and my last thing is just going to be to try and lighten up those eyes again. A little bit of white in an animal or a person's eye really makes the eye come alive. Right, and I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave my picture as it is. I hope you had fun drawing this little kitten and learned a little bit more about pencil sketching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and why not subscribe to my channel? We put up new ideas every week.